The town of Briarfield sat quietly along the Cooper River, its whitewashed houses and shaded porches giving no hint of the unease that had settled there in the late 1840s. From a distance, it looked like any other southern town. Church bells on Sunday mornings, cotton wagons creaking through dirt roads, the smell of magnolia thick in the air. But beneath its calm surface lay a story that was never meant to survive. A story kept alive only through fragments, half-remembered names, and things deliberately left unsaid. In the spring of 1848, a brief notice appeared in the Charleston Courier announcing the disappearance of Mrs. Adelaide Whitmore, a widow of considerable means, last seen departing her estate outside Briarfield. The notice was vague, offering no reward and requesting no public assistance. It simply stated that her affairs were being handled privately by family representatives. Most readers passed over it without a second thought. Widows moved, estates changed hands, life went on. What the notice did not mention was that Adelaide Whitmore had not left alone. Adelaide had been born Adelaide Fenton, into a family whose wealth came from indigo and rice. She was educated unusually well for a woman of her time, taught French, Latin, and mathematics by a private tutor her mother insisted upon. Those who knew her as a girl described her as observant rather than outspoken, the kind of child who listened carefully and remembered everything. She married young, as expected, to Henry Whitmore, a plantation owner nearly twice her age. Their marriage was considered respectable and uneventful. Henry provided stability, Adelaide managed the household. They had no children. Henry Whitmore died suddenly in the winter of 1845, thrown from a horse on a rain-slick road. His death was mourned appropriately. His widow wore black. The plantation continued to function without disruption. Neighbors remarked on Adelaide's composure. She seemed, if anything, more alive after his passing, more attentive, more present. Among the enslaved population of the Whitmore estate was a young man named Isaiah. He had arrived at the plantation as a child, brought from a neighboring county after his mother was sold. He worked first in the fields, then in the stables, and eventually as a general attendant in the main house. Plantation records listed him simply as I. No surname, no age, no history. Yet in Adelaide's personal account books, Isaiah appeared often. Small notes in the margins, extra fabric ordered, a pair of boots replaced sooner than expected. Later, books, a slate, chalk. According to a letter written by Adelaide's cousin Clara in 1846, Adelaide has taken an unusual interest in the education of one of her servants. She claims it improves his usefulness. I cannot say I understand her reasoning, but she speaks with such conviction that one hesitates to question her. The lessons began quietly, in the evenings, in a storage room near the old smokehouse where few had reason to go. Adelaide taught Isaiah his letters using pages torn from discarded ledgers. He learned quickly, too quickly. Soon he was reading aloud passages from Scripture, then from poetry Adelaide remembered from her youth. She corrected his pronunciation, he corrected her memory. Neither spoke of what they were doing to anyone else. At first, Adelaide told herself it was charity, then necessity, then habit. Eventually, she stopped naming it at all. By 1847, Isaiah had become indispensable to the operation of the estate. He kept accounts, corresponded with merchants, managed repairs. Other servants deferred to him. Adelaide deferred to him. When visitors came, he stood behind her chair, silent and observant, absorbing every word. People noticed. A neighbor later recalled that the two moved through the house as if in agreement, like musicians who knew the same piece by heart. There was nothing overt, no public impropriety, just a closeness that unsettled those accustomed to rigid boundaries. It was Adelaide's brother, Samuel Fenton, who forced the matter into the open. Samuel arrived unannounced in February of 1848, citing concerns over the management of the estate. He stayed 2 nights. On the second evening, he entered the smokehouse without warning and found his sister and Isaiah seated at a table, books spread between them, their heads bent close together. What was said afterward exists only in fragments. Samuel's letter to their uncle described a perversion of natural order. A servant later claimed to have heard shouting. Adelaide was seen the next morning, calm, resolute, dressed not in mourning black, but in plain gray. Within weeks, legal documents were filed. Samuel moved to assume control of the estate. Questions were raised about Adelaide's mental state. Rumors spread, carefully worded but unmistakable. Then, on April 2nd, Adelaide Whitmore and Isaiah vanished. The house was found locked, furniture covered, account books neatly stacked. In a small room behind the smokehouse, investigators found nothing but a faint chalk inscription on the wall, partially erased. Only 3 words were legible. "We chose this." Searches were conducted quietly and abandoned quickly. No reward was offered, no serious effort made. Officially, Adelaide was said to have relocated north for her health. Isaiah's absence went unrecorded. Years passed. In 1861, during renovations of a boarding house in Albany, New York, workers discovered a false wall concealing a bundle of letters. The letters were written in a careful feminine hand, addressed to an unnamed recipient, signed only A. They spoke of a new life, of fear slowly giving way to peace, of a man who walks beside me as an equal, not in shadow, but in light. The letters ended abruptly in 1854. In 1873, a fire destroyed records in a small Ontario town. Among the lost documents were business registrations for a cooperage run by a man named Isaac White and his wife, Ada. Church records listed them as contributors, quiet, generous, childless. In 1902, a school teacher in that same town donated a box of old books to the local library. Inside one volume of poetry, pressed between pages, was a faded note written in 2 hands. "Whatever they call us, we know who we are." No one connected the pieces at the time. It wasn't until 1938 that a graduate student researching antebellum estate transfers noticed discrepancies in the Whitmore records, missing funds, unaccounted assets, a curious absence of sale documents for one enslaved man. Her notes were never published. Today, nothing remains of the Whitmore estate. A shopping plaza stands where the house once did. People drive past without knowing, or perhaps without wanting to know. History prefers clean lines, clear villains, simple endings. This story offers none of that. Only the suggestion that somewhere, in the spaces between records, 2 people chose each other when everything around them insisted they should not, that they paid for that choice with exile, silence, and erasure, and that despite all efforts to suppress it, the truth left marks, letters hidden in walls, names changed but not forgotten, fragments that refuse to disappear. Because some stories, no matter how deeply buried, continue to surface, not loudly, not completely, but enough to remind us that the past is not as obedient as we would like it to be.